For this mini lecture on Module 4, we're just going to work through a couple more examples on Z-scores and proportions. In the last example we looked at percentages, but proportions are very similar. So in the last example, in the previous mini lecture, we were looking at the percentage of women delivering their babies 2 weeks after the average due date. So now we're going to look at what percentage of women are delivering their baby within 1 week of the average due date. So now we're looking at within 1 week of the mean due date. We know from the last example that the mean is 266 days and the standard deviation is 16 days. So now that we're interested in 1 week on either side of the due date, we're interested in, here's our distribution, our mean of 266. Now we're interested in plus and minus 7 days on either side. So because our distribution is symmetrical, we can just pick one. So we'll pick this side here and then just also apply it on the other side as well. So this is day 273. And if you look at the table C, you can see how the how this area here is also the mirror image of on the other side. So we only have to do it once. So now when we're calculating our score, we're going to have 273 minus 266 divided by 16, which is 7 divided by 16, because we're interested in a week on either side, which is going to be equal to 0.4375. Now we can take this information and do step 2, which is going and looking at the table C. Alright, so here's table C. Again, follow along on your own because this is pretty small. We're interested now in column B because we're looking between the mean and our value. Our Z-score is 0.44. Move this up. So we're interested in 0.44, and we're looking at column B. So our value for one side is 0.1700. So we've gone and looked at the value in the table, and the proportion on one side, is equal to 0.1700. So to now find it on the other side as well, so that's at this part, we can just mirror image that. So now it's going to be 2 times 0.1700. And we can draw our conclusion. And our conclusion is that 34% of pregnant women give birth within 7 days of the mean due date. So that's another example on how you can calculate this. We can do one more because you can pick any range of values and determine the proportion or the percentage of data that falls between those bounds. But it is really helpful to first sketch them out. So for this next example, we're going to look at what percentage of women have babies between days 240 to 250. So what percentage of women have babies between days 240 to 250. Again, you could pause the recording here, try this out on your own, and then come back. Of course, that's up to you. So, first step, the first step that's always good is to sketch this out. So we have our mean of 266, and this time what we're interested in is day 240 to day 250. So we're interested in this area here, right? All this shaded area. And the table doesn't give you information on that. So the easiest way to do this is to do it in two steps. The first one is to look at day 240 to 266. And then the second step would be to look at day 250 to 266 and then subtract those. Because what you'll be left with is day 240 to 250. Okay, so you take day 240 to 266, subtract 250 to 266, and the remainder will be day 240 to 250. So we'll do this in two different chunks here. So the first chunk, so we'll call this step number 1, is 240 to 266. And our first step here, and our standard deviation is the same, so it's minus 26 over 16. Our values now are negative because they're below the mean. That doesn't really matter because when you look at the table, you'll be looking only at positive values anyway. So when we go to the table, we're going to be looking at column B because we're looking between the value and the mean. And we're looking at 1.625. So 1.63, which is down here. And we're looking at column B, so it's 4484. So 0.4484. So the percentage from 240 to 260 is 44.84%. Again, you can work on these as proportions or as percentages. Just make sure that you keep things straight in your mind so that you're not mixing up where your decimal is supposed to be. All right, so that's the percentage from 240 to 260. Okay, 240 to 260. Our second step is going to be 250 to 266. So 250 minus 266 divided by 16. Again, this is going to be negative. It's equal to 1. We're going to look at our table. Here's 1. There's our value. It's 0.3413. So we go to the table. The percent from 250 to 266 is 34.13%. So now we have these two chunks. Here's step 1, going from 240 to the mean. Here is step 2, going 250 to the mean, which is 266. So now, to figure out that remainder, we're going to subtract 2 from 1. So 1 minus 2 is going to give us the values from 240 to 250. Right? When we subtract 1 and 2. So that's 44.84% minus 34.13%, and that's going to equal 10.71%. And we can conclude then that 10.7% of women give birth between days 240 and 250 of pregnancy. So 10.71% of women give birth between days 240 and 250 of pregnancy. And that concludes this mini lecture.